Testing 1, 2. All right. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Paul. I am the principal of New Urban Concepts, and tonight I'm going to be presenting the City of Oviedo's Mobility Plan and Mobility Fee, Extraordinary Circumstances. This is the 6:30 p.m. workshop on April 23rd, 2024. Extraordinary circumstances is a requirement of Florida statute adopted by the legislature through an amendment of the Impact Fee Act in 2021. And essentially this relates to any impact fee or any mobility fee proposed by a local government, such as the City of Oviedo, that is looking to increase the fees above the existing rates, or update their impact fees or mobility fees that would result in an increase. The statutory requirements limit any increase of existing fees to 50% above the current impact fee or mobility fee. Increases of 25% or less are required to be phased in equal increments over 2 years, and any increase between 25.1% and 50% over existing fees are phased in equal increments over a 4-year period. There is one exception. That's if a local government goes through the process and makes a finding of extraordinary circumstances. That is what we are here for this evening. It requires a needs study with documented findings. That study must not be more than 12 months old. It requires 2 advertised public workshops. One was held this morning, April 23rd, 2024 at 9:30 a.m. And this is the second workshop held at 6:30 p.m. on the same date. The extraordinary circumstances to increase any fee does require a supermajority vote of the elected officials. So this will be a 2/3 vote of the City Council to approve extraordinary circumstances. This public meeting and the meeting this morning has been properly noticed. It was provided on the public notices for the city's website, as well as current news on the city. And it was also published in the Orlando Sentinel on April 13th. An ad was run, and this is an example and proof of that advertisement. There is a detailed study that has been prepared. It is referred to as a 2045 Mobility Plan, Mobility Fee, Extraordinary Circumstances Study, dated April 2024. This documents the findings of extraordinary circumstances for the city's proposed mobility fee. It provides the data and analysis that we are going to present today, and it is based on the 2045 Mobility Plan and Mobility Fee Technical Report, dated September 2023. Both of these documents are available upon request from the City of Oviedo. The findings of extraordinary circumstances for the city to move forward with mobility fees. The City of Oviedo has developed a detailed mobility plan and mobility fee. That mobility fee is intended to replace its existing transportation impact fee and Seminole County's mobility fee. And the following are the findings that we will discuss further in this presentation. The first finding is that the city's population over the past 30 years has grown faster than the state of Florida. It is recognized the state of Florida is one of the fastest growing states in the entire country in terms of population growth. Many would consider that growth extraordinary. And so one metric that's been used by many communities is your city or is your community growing faster than the state of Florida? That would lead to an extraordinary growth and an extraordinary circumstance. In this instance, the City of Oviedo has, from 1990 to 2020 timeframe, grown faster than the state of Florida. The mobility study area that we've evaluated as part of the fee update is projected to increase as fast as the state of Florida between 2020 and 2045. The mobility study area is vehicle miles of travel. It's essentially how many vehicles are on the roadway and the length those vehicles travel is projected to increase faster than the state of Florida. The city has taken a process to develop a detailed improvements-based mobility plan, which identifies multimodal projects such as roads, sidewalks, and bike lanes throughout the city, specifically to meet the increase in travel demand between 2020 and 2045. The fifth factor that was been considered as a finding is since the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation in construction costs has increased by more than 50% during that time. Typically, inflation runs anywhere from 3% to 5% a year, which would be 9% to 15% over that same horizon. 50% inflation is extraordinary. The city's fee is also providing programs for affordable housing, small retail businesses, and mixed-use development that will offer a lower mobility fee for those types of projects. And the final finding of circumstance is, as the city has transitioned to a streamlined mobility fee schedule based on the most recent localized data changes, there has been some significant extraordinary changes into the documents that are evaluated and used to calculate impact fees and mobility fees, and that will be detailed as part of this presentation. The City of Oviedo's mobility plan, mobility fee, is a vision over the next 22 years for moving people. The mobility fee itself is a simple, transparent way for new development to pay for its impact to the transportation system. The city has a roadway impact fee today. Seminole County has a mobility fee today. Both of those are assessed to new development within the city, and the county assesses its fee both within unincorporated county and within the city of Oviedo. The mobility fee would be a single one-time fee assessed by the city of Oviedo, which would replace both the city's fee and the county's fee, and it would only be charged to new development. It is not a tax. It is not an assessment on existing businesses or existing residents within Oviedo. It's only towards new development. So the mobility plan is really focused on accommodating all modes of transportation, whether somebody elects to walk, bicycle, ride transit, use a golf cart, take Uber or Lyft, or drive their motor vehicle. The mobility plan includes projects for all types of transportation and all modes of transportation. There's a detailed analysis that goes into developing a plan and fee, and this is just an example of that, and these are the 18 steps that we undertook to develop the city's mobility plan and mobility fee, and this is documented in a detailed technical report, which I will illustrate shortly. So the mobility plan includes a multitude of projects for all modes of transportation. These are just some of them for what's known as on-street facilities, or most people would know about bicycle lanes, whether they be an existing bicycle lane or a protected or buffered bicycle lane. And there's also the potential for what are known as multimodal lanes, and these would also accommodate golf carts or transit vehicles. The mobility plan primarily focuses for people walking and bicycling on off-street facilities. These are bicycle ways or lanes, sidewalks, paths, and trails that are actually separated from car traffic and are outside of the roadway travel lanes. Most people feel more comfortable traveling on their own dedicated facility, walking and bicycling, as opposed to bicycling on street. The mobility plan itself is comprised of 7 different plans, the first of which is known as a streets plan, and this identifies both new roadways and the widening of existing roadways throughout the city and throughout the mobility study area. And each one of these projects is detailed further in the technical report. Mobility plan also includes a multimodal plan, which features shared use pathways, trails, and boardwalks that are proposed throughout the city. And many of these are connecting to the existing trail system that exists within the city and in the surrounding areas. This is just one example of a project. There is proposal along Alexandria Boulevard to reconsider the roadway from a 4-lane undivided section today to a 2-lane roadway. Possibilities include a raised median, protected on-street bicycle lanes, or a wider multi-use path. The mobility plan identifies multiple projects that could be constructed along this roadway. The ultimate configuration of Alexandria would be something that would be determined further through a separate design proposal. Similarly, there are proposals to add shared use paths along Oviedo Boulevard from County Road 419 all the way down to Mitchell Hammock, and the mobility plan details different configurations and different options for Oviedo Boulevard depending on what the right-of-way is. Again, like Alexandria Boulevard, this corridor would be further designed as a follow-on process. Mobility plan also includes an intersection plan that features turn lanes, new traffic signals, future roundabouts, and also the possibility of a new interchange at Winter Springs Boulevard where it intersects with State Road 417. An access connection plan has been developed to assist city staff as they review new commercial redevelopment and office development along some of the major corridors within the city, such as Mitchell Hammock and 434. And this is really an opportunity to promote connectivity between existing retail and office uses and redevelopment along those corridors. These access connections would provide alternatives to traffic going out onto the major road system. Mobility plan also identifies gaps in the existing sidewalk network today, and these are primarily identified along major arterial and collector roadways within the city. And finally, there's a future considerations map. This really identifies projects that have been discussed both within the city and within the unincorporated areas surrounding the city. Each one of these is going to require further analysis by the city and also community outreach. These are not adopted as part of the mobility plan, but they're essentially noted as improvements that have been discussed during this process and something that may be followed up more in the future. And finally, the mobility plan concludes with several action items, including a detailed sidewalk master plan, which would largely look at local roadways, a safe routes to school program, and also the possibility of a Vision Zero action plan focused on making city streets safer for all users of the transportation system. Now I'm going to get a little bit into more of the detail related specifically to extraordinary circumstances. One of the factors we looked at is how fast has the city grown compared to the state of Florida. The city experienced some of its greatest growth between 1990 and 2000, where the population went from just over 11,000 to over 26,000 during that time frame, or an increase of roughly 131%, which was significantly higher than the state of Florida. From 2000 to 2020, the city's growth rate has slowed some as its population has increased, but during that time frame, the population has still gone from 26,000 to over 40,000 and has been greater than the state of Florida. So many would actually consider that extraordinary growth in this community. The mobility plan addresses both projects within the city of Oviedo and within the surrounding areas of unincorporated Seminole County. Specifically, we looked at the travel between the southern limits of the city and Orange County and identified additional projects that are needed within this area. So the mobility fee study area itself is actually larger than just city limits. And within that study area, there's a projected increase in population of roughly 17,000 residents between 2020 and 2045. Whether that area remains unincorporated or should it eventually annex into the city of Oviedo, the population growth will be significant and will keep pace with that of the state of Florida, which is also expected to grow significantly during that time frame. We also looked at traffic within the study area and how that's going to grow in relation to the projected growth overall within the state of Florida. State of Florida travel is expected to grow by 30% during roughly over a 20-year period. During that same time frame, traffic would grow roughly 37% within both the city of Oviedo and its study area. Again, that's fairly extraordinary growth within the community, and one of the reasons we are looking to recommend that the city adopt its fully calculated mobility fee rates, and that the city does move forward with a finding of extraordinary circumstances. Because that growth is going to continue and is going to continue to generate demand for improvements within the city. The mobility plan, which is detailed in the technical report, includes a number of analyses to demonstrate how the projects in the mobility plan specifically relate to new development, how much that system is going to cost, and what share of that cost is borne by new development. The final factor that we've looked at in terms of a finding of extraordinary circumstance beyond the mobility fee calculation itself is the increase in inflation. Throughout the country, communities are feeling it, individuals are feeling it in terms of cost of food, cost of housing, cost of gas, and likewise, we've also witnessed the same inflation within construction of roadways, sidewalks, and bicycle lanes. And just over a 3-year period, which is roughly the time frame we looked at in the technical report, from 2020 to 2023 as existing conditions, there's been a 50% increase in inflation during that time frame. As I mentioned earlier, typical inflation is roughly 3 to 5% a year, which would be anywhere from 9% to 15% during that time frame. And we are looking at inflation of roughly 50%, which is rather extraordinary in terms of the cost of the city providing new roads, widening roads, and bike lanes and sidewalks. We'll also look at all this as it relates specifically to the mobility fee itself. And the mobility fee will be a funding source for the city to help fund the projects identified in the mobility plan. Again, we looked at the mobility fee throughout the entire study area, and it is based on the mobility plan projects within the mobility study area. In terms of the assessment on new development, the mobility fee will be assessed within the city of Oviedo to new projects. And then should the city of Oviedo annex lands into the future, the ordinance and the technical report plans for that. And as areas were to annex into the city, any new development that occurs in those would also be assessed a mobility fee. Mobility fee benefit districts determine where the money can actually be spent once it's collected. Today, the city's road impact fee is only spent within the city because it only covers projects within the city itself. The mobility fee addresses projects both within the city of Oviedo and within the overall mobility study area. So the fees could be spent anywhere within that yellow area to advance improvements identified in the mobility plan. The detailed technical report, which is available from the city upon request, includes all the data and analysis in addition to all the plans and projects projected for 2045. It's roughly 200 plus pages of detailed analysis. I'm not going to go through all the calculations, but they are there. And this is really the basis for the technical data that we've used for the finding of extraordinary circumstance. There was an analysis done of origin and destination trips throughout Seminole County, and specifically for both the city of Oviedo and the study area. The area in green is the city limits. The area in red is what we refer to as the core mobility area. The area in yellow is the study area, and the area in blue are the zones that are significantly found to have traffic that goes into and out of the city of Oviedo. And what this analysis showed is roughly 50% of all trips that start in Oviedo end in Oviedo. They don't go outside the city. People in the community stay within Oviedo to shop, to go to church, to go to school. So a large percentage of the trips stay local to the community. Another share of the trips go down into Orange County. And in the area that I had shown in blue before, 94% of those trips are going into and out of the city of Oviedo. So in essence, the city of Oviedo functions as the downtown for Eastern Seminole County. In terms of the mobility fee, this is intended to replace both the city's existing impact fee and the county's mobility fee. Both the city's fee and the county mobility fee charge different rates for single-family homes, for townhomes, and for multifamily homes. The mobility fee is proposed to charge a single rate for any type of residential within the city. This helps to streamline the overall process, and it's more related to the actual impact of specific uses. So today, if a 1,000 square foot single family home came in the city of Oviedo, the mobility fee would be $2,728. Mostly Oviedo's experienced single family homes that are 2,000 square feet or greater in size. So in essence, you would multiply that by 2. But if a 1,000 square foot mobility or single family home came into the city, it would actually see a reduction in its fee compared to that of the city and county today, which would be $3,800. More typical would be a 2,200 square foot single family home within Oviedo. The mobility fee for that would be $6,000. The combined rate today of the city's impact fee and mobility fee is roughly $4,300, which is an increase of 37%. So that 37% as of statute's requirements today would have to be phased in over a 4-year period. So the city could not increase that mobility fee to $6,000 without a finding of extraordinary circumstances. If you look at a 2,700 square foot house, the mobility fee increases to $7,500, and that's a 42% increase over the existing rate. Roughly when you reach a 3,000 square foot threshold, any home above that would actually result in a fee that's greater than 50%. Per statute, that would be capped at 50%, and that 42% increase in this example would have to be phased in over 4 years. And why that's significant is in the last 3 years, the cost of construction's gone up by 50%. Inflation's slowing somewhat, but it's still averaging between 5 and 10% a year on construction cost. So if the city were phasing in its fees over a 4-year period, the city would consistently be behind in funding transportation because the increase in the fee would not keep up with what's being experienced in terms of the impact and increases in inflation. If we look at a townhome of 1,500 square feet, the mobility fee would be roughly $4,000. The combined city impact fee and mobility fee of the county today is $2,800. That's a 45% increase. For a 1,000 square foot apartment, the fee would be $2,728. Under the city's impact fee and county fee, it'd be $2,000. That's roughly an increase of 30%, which would have to be phased in over a 4-year period. And if you notice, each one of the fees for the city is $2,728 per 1,000 square feet. It doesn't matter if it's a townhome, an apartment, a single family home, they all pay the same rate. Whereas today within the city's impact fee and the county's mobility fee, it varies for each one of those residential uses. The city's proposed mobility fee for affordable residential is actually lower than the city's rate today and the county's rate. The county actually does have an affordable impact fee or mobility fee. The city does not today, so that's part of the reason for the large reduction. And the city has not yet established a process to define what's affordable residential as it relates to mobility fees. But once they do so or elect to do so and somebody qualifies, their actual rate would be a reduction over the existing mobility fees today. That's actually one of the exceptions, specifically because it does reflect lower overall trip generation for affordable residential uses. For hotels, the mobility fee would increase 41% over existing rates, and for mobile residents, which there really aren't a lot of in the city, and I don't necessarily think there's going to be more in the future, but if there were, that fee would actually increase by roughly 97%. For community serving uses such as places of worship, places of assembly, the mobility fee is projected to increase by 45%. For nursing facilities and assisted living care, it's going to increase by 25%. And for private education, it would increase by roughly 15%. Charter schools and public schools are exempt from impact fees and mobility fees, so the private education would just be for private schools or for daycare uses. But as you can see, all these percentages vary significantly, and they would all have to be phased in at different rates and at different time frames under existing statute without a finding of extraordinary circumstances. The industrial rate is relatively similar to the fees today. There is a proposal for a new outdoor commercial recreation. So this would be for a golf driving range or a top golf type of use or go-karts, any type of outdoor commercial activity that actually charges for service. And there's also an indoor commercial recreation fee, which is slightly lower. And a lot of the mobility fees, the reason for these differences is actually changes in the underlying trip generation itself, not just necessarily a random factor, but the actual factors and analysis used to calculate the fee has changed over the last 5 years from when the city last adopted its impact fee and from when the county last adopted its mobility fee. Office uses are projected to increase by roughly 32%, and medical office uses are projected to increase by roughly 20%. For small retail business, this is something new that's been established. Really, this is an idea that's come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. There were a number of programs that were established to help out small local businesses. And should the city elect to establish a similar program, it could actually offer a lower overall mobility fee. The retail rate for mobility fees has stayed roughly the same, in part because some of the underlying factors for trip generation have become more detailed, and that has resulted in what's known as high impact retail uses, those uses that generate roughly 100 trips per 1,000 square feet. Those have gone up significantly. Some of the underlying data that's used to calculate trip generation has materially changed between the last time fees were updated and based on the current trip generation today. So that's why you see some of these overall increases, such as an 86% increase in high impact retail uses and a 24% increase in retail uses. There's been trends within the development community for banks and fast food restaurants to both get smaller and to add either freestanding drive-through ATM machines or add additional drive-through lanes for fast food. So this is a new fee that's actually being proposed. There's also a new fee. There's car washes that are popping up throughout Florida that are generating a significant transportation impact. So this is a new fee as well. and there's been changes to the underlying trip generation, which is resulting in motor vehicle fueling increasing by 92% over existing rates. In terms of the bank and the fast food, one of the reasons for extraordinary circumstances is banks and fast food are not charged today for drive-throughs. So when you combine that with an 86% increase in high-impact retail, plus a new drive-through rate, they would both greatly exceed the 50% threshold in statute. And that reason for that really is an extraordinary change in underlying trip generation, more so than just any type of random factor used to calculate mobility fees. So with that, just to recap as we're winding down the presentation, current statute today limits increases to 50% above current fees. If an increase is of 25% or less, those have to be phased in equal increments over a 2-year period. If there's an increase between 25.1% or 01% and 50%, they have to be phased in over a 4-year time frame. With inflation continuing to run high, any type of phasing in of the fees will put the city further behind in terms of funding its transportation needs. There is the exception, which is extraordinary circumstance. It requires a detailed study, which is a technical report. That study cannot be any older than 12 months. It was completed in September of 2023, which is less than 12 months time frame. There's a requirement for 2 public workshops. Those were both held on April 23rd, 2024. The first at 9:30 a.m., the second this evening at 6:30 p.m. And ultimately, before any decision is made, it does require a 2/3 vote of the City Council to approve extraordinary circumstances. And just to, in conclusion, the extraordinary circumstance finding, the City of Oviedo has grown faster than the state of Florida over the past 30 years and has experienced extraordinary population growth. It's projected between now and 2045 to continue to grow at an extraordinary rate similar to that of the state of Florida. There's an extraordinary projection of growth in vehicle miles of travel for the study area by 2045 that exceeds that of the state of Florida. The mobility fee itself is now based on a very detailed needs analysis and a need for multimodal projects specifically to accommodate projected growth in the study area, and that new development is not being charged more than its fair share of the overall cost. Today, the city does not have a mobility plan, so the impact fee is just based on a computation based on the need for capacity. The mobility fee is actually based on very specific projects that are going to be built or projected to be built within the city over the next 20 plus years. The fifth finding for extraordinary circumstances is that there has been a significant increase in excess of 50% in inflation cost and construction cost over the past 3 years, and inflation continues to run high. Should the city not adopt the fully calculated mobility fees, the city will continue to fall further behind in the funding of its transportation system. The city has also established programs for workforce housing, affordable housing, small retail business, and mixed-use developments to provide for a lower mobility fee for different types of development that actually would qualify for that. And finally, the update of the trip generation manual that's used throughout the country to calculate impact fees, mobility fees, and trip generation has resulted in a number of uses having much higher trip generation rates over existing fees. Had those existing fees and had the trip generation manual been in effect at the time the county's mobility fee and the city's prior impact fee were calculated, these overall increases would not be so significant. So this really is something beyond the city's control, and it is an extraordinary increase in overall impact for a number of the land uses. So in conclusion, it is a recommendation that the City Council should adopt the mobility fee at the fully calculated rates based on the findings documented in extraordinary circumstances dated April 2024, and the data analysis in the 2045 mobility plan and mobility fee technical report dated September 2023, both of which were prepared by New Urban Concepts. The next steps is there will be a mobility fee ordinance developed and will be presented to the City Council at a first reading. They'll provide direction on whether or not to proceed to a second reading. That first reading is expected sometime within the May timeframe, and then the actual final adoption would be within the June, potentially as late as the first part of July, but essentially it would be adopted this summer. And so with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if we have any from members of the public that are in attendance today.
Just wanted to make sure I understand the process. So we've never had a schedule like this before, so that's kind of why we're behind. Is that right?
Not necessarily why we're behind. The big reason being behind is one, or not necessarily behind, but for the increases is inflation cost. So inflation's gone up dramatically since the fees were last updated. The underlying trip generations also changed for many uses, and the city's actually also identified specific projects to meet the growth from new development. Beforehand, the prior transportation impact fee and the county's mobility fee, they're calculated on what's known as a consumption-based system, and really all that system says is new development generates traffic. That traffic needs new road capacity. The road capacity costs so much per mile. It isn't based on any specific project or specifically tied to new development. It's just an exercise in calculation about how much a trip basically costs. Under the mobility fee, there's actually a whole list of projects. It's detailed, it's transparent, and that's actually what the fee itself is calculated on. So really the transition to a improvements-based plan, changes in trip generation, and the increases in construction cost are the primary drivers and primary reasons why these fees are higher today than the existing county fee and the city's transportation impact fee.
Okay. And under the new plan, are all projects now paying fees? Because I noticed some of them on the list are new, so they weren't paying fees before at all.
Well, any new development that comes into the city would pays a city impact fee and a county mobility fee. In the future, when they come in, they would just pay a city mobility fee.
Okay.
But any new development is paying for the fees today. In terms of what I mentioned, the word projects, that's projects as it relates to a sidewalk, a shared use path, a roadway improvement, such as what's going on 419 today.
Oh, I mean, like, maybe banks or drive-throughs weren't paying before?
So they were paying per square foot of the building, but they weren't necessarily paying for the drive-throughs. And what's happening in the industry is banks are shrinking their footprint. So they're going from, historically they were around 3,500 square feet. Now they're going down to roughly 2,000 square feet, and they're adding 1, 2, 3 drive-through ATMs or automated teller machines. So the trip impacts is still there, but when the fee is just based on square footage, you're not capturing that any longer because the actual square footage of the use is getting smaller. Likewise, many of the fast food restaurants are starting to transition to drive-throughs. They're closing their sit-down restaurants, and they're largely accommodating pickup traffic from Uber, from Lyft, from DoorDash, in addition to more car traffic. and those were not captured beforehand.
Okay. That would kind of seem like we would be getting less from them then, because if we're basing it on square footage and they're reducing it, right?
If we kept it at just the square footage, yes, the city would be getting less.
Okay.
But now it's also charging per drive-through lane.
trip factor
So
stuff.
when you add
Okay.
in the cost of the drive-through lane, which is what a lot of them are transitioning to, or today, say a fast food restaurant comes in, and Teresa, I'm not sure if there's been any examples in the city, there have been throughout Florida, but a Chick-fil-A or McDonald's will come in and actually add an additional drive-through lane. Right now, they're not charged a mobility fee or impact fee today
Gotcha.
for
Okay.
that drive-through lane. Going forward, if they come in and they add a drive-through lane, or they come in and they propose 3 drive-through lanes, they'll be charged for both the building if it's brand new, plus any of the drive-through lanes. So that's not something that's captured today.
Okay, that was my question, is everything covered or captured now with the new plan?
It will be under the new fee. It's not currently today.
Okay. And then there was something about, there was there was a yellow area and a red area, and like funds could be used in the yellow, but it's not really Oviedo?
They can actually be used both within the city of Oviedo and within the mobility study area. So we include improvements along portions of Chapman Road, along portions of County Road 419, that traffic from the city is using, and also traffic from outside is using to come into the city. So today, under the city's fee, it can only be spent within the city limits. Going forward, if there's a mobility project outside of the city limits, say an extension of Slavia Road, the city can contribute a portion of that funding to the county to actually advance that project. And part of the reason that's important is this fee is replacing the county's mobility fee. And there are county projects both within the city and within the mobility study area that need to be improved. So a portion of the city's fee can be contributed or go towards county projects. And there may likely be an interlocal agreement between the city and the county that sets aside anywhere from 15% to 25% of the fee for county projects. If we didn't show the yellow area, that money could not be spent on those county projects. And several of those are of a benefit to the city.
That was my question, whether that was gonna hurt or benefit the city.
Yes.
The
So
whole
t-
county?
Yes,
Gotcha.
so today, when Seminole County assesses its mobility fee, and it assesses Oviedo at what it calls a suburban rate. So it considers Oviedo a suburban community, and it assesses a lower rate in Sanford and Altamont, and portions along the US 1792 corridor, because those are considered urban. Well, what we found in part of our study is Oviedo actually functions as a downtown for all of eastern Seminole County. So Oviedo in and of itself is both urban in nature and is continuing to urbanize. So it actually should have had a lower overall county mobility fee. But right now, the county can collect that money in Oviedo and spend it on a sidewalk in Sanford, spend it on a bike lane in Altamont. Vice versa, they can take money from Altamont or from Sanford and spend it in Oviedo, but that's not really the overriding factor. What is that money can be spent anywhere within the community, not directly to a benefit of the businesses and residents paying it within Oviedo. Under this scenario, all the money assessed is going to be spent either within Oviedo or within that yellow area on projects that help access the city of Oviedo. So that's a very significant change from where we're at today.
And if we go with extraordinary circumstances, do the fees still have to be in increments?
No. So
Okay,
choosing to go through extraordinary circumstances allows the city to both adopt rates at the fully calculated amount. So based on the technical report, the actual dollar figures that we've shown in that, they can adopt it at that fully calculated rate, and they're not required to phase it in. So that would go into effect within 90 days after they adopt these rates, as opposed to phasing in over a 4-year period.
And how do those, the per trip calculations, how do they apply to residential?
So essentially, they apply on a square footage basis. So if you're building a tiny home of 400
Not per
square
trip.
foot,
Okay.
you would pay for 400 square feet. If you were building a large residential home of, say, 5,000 square feet, you would pay for 5,000 square feet. So it's the same dollar amount per square foot, but it increases or decreases as a home gets larger or smaller. And it's found to be a much, one, it more accurately reflects the overall impact of uses. As homes get larger, they tend to have more deliveries coming to them. They have more services, landscape, pools, other types of uses, whereas smaller types of homes generally don't generate that same level of impact.
Okay.
Correct.
Per unit. Oh, gotcha. Based on square footage.
Right, so
Okay.
today, well, the county has 3 tiers for residential, so it kind of captures a little bit of the difference. The city's fee is a flat rate, so if you're a 800 square foot single-family home, or you're a 5,000 square foot single home, you pay the exact same rate, even though there's a marked difference in overall impact between the two of them.
Okay. Because the increases are larger,
Yes.
for the residential. But that's why the rate wasn't really fair previously.
Well, I mean, it was
unit.
it was a different methodology. It was a different methodology. It was a different time frame. And Oviedo's not, unique in that. There's a lot of communities that have historically done it by dwelling unit, but quite a few of them are transitioning to the square footage
Okay.
because it is a fairer overall calculation. And that's, an office use, a retail use, an industrial use, they're all calculated on a square footage basis. So essentially, that's meaning residential is calculated the same way as all of the types of land uses.
Okay. And then it's not about the fees, but when we looked at the connection with the possible new sidewalks, there's nothing that's really connected throughout the whole city.
Well, that's one of the things that we're trying to capture with really the city's primarily focused on a system of shared use pathways on its major roads.
Okay.
So those would be taking, say, an existing sidewalk that's 5 foot in width and replacing it with a path of 8 foot or a trail of 10 foot wide. So it'd basically be widening the existing sidewalks. A good example is if you go out on the 419 today and you see it being constructed, you'll see the new portions of 419 all have anywhere from a 7 to 8 foot wide sidewalk or pathway up to 12 foot wide. And then when it goes to the existing sections, it's back down to 5 foot. So a lot of the major roads, the plan reflects that people feel more comfortable riding a bicycle or walking separated from traffic. So it really emphasizes shared use pathways and trails. But we've also identified along some of the roadways where we're not proposing that, closing gaps in the sidewalk system. And again, mobility fees are largely focused on major roads, collectors, and arterials. A sidewalk master plan would be focused more on local residential streets.
Okay. So connection is still out of reach?
So this needs to help with the connectivity.
And should the city identify a sidewalk master plan or a safe routes to school, it'll be able to use mobility fees for that.
Okay.
But that's really you know, we're talking the major road system now, and that's taken, it's almost been a 3-year period we've been looking at that. You could easily spend a year or two just evaluating all your local
sidewalk
roads
master plan.
and identifying a need. So that would really be, most communities look at a sidewalk master plan for that, to close in those little gaps
Okay.
in the local roadway network.
Okay.
But in terms of the multimodal connections, the pathways and the trails, I mean, the mobility plan covers a lot of the major corridors and does provide for a lot more connectivity, both of those existing roads and to the city's existing trail system. Yeah, so all the colors connect. So the brown color is an existing trail. The green is a brand-new standalone trail. The magenta color would be a brand-new shared-use path. Some of the pathways are constructed when a road's going to be improved. Some of them will be constructed as part of a new roadway. And other ones, the green, which is the most dominant one, is replacing smaller sidewalks that exist today with larger shared-use pathways. All right. Those are all great questions, and this information and this presentation will be available on the city's website for viewing. Both the extraordinary circumstance study and a technical report are both available upon request from the city. The city can be contacted with any questions as it moves forward with the ordinance for mobility plans and mobility fees. And my contact information is below, and this will also be available on the presentation on the city's website, and we're available to answer any questions from members of the public that may have them. And Teresa, Deborah, forgive me if I'm wrong, I believe there will also be a presentation before the land development or the planning board in addition to the city council as part of this, or? Okay, all right. So there will be a presentation before the city council in roughly the May timeframe that will go over this presentation again, plus the ordinance, and then it is actually projected for adoption in either June or July. So there will be additional chances for members of the public to provide feedback and to provide comments to the city. So with that concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you all for attending and listening, and have a good evening. Thank you.